The craft of woodworking, regardless of the culture it's developed in, relies on the relationship between timber and steel. At Japanese Tools Australia, we believe that owning and tuning a Japanese plane is a wonderful way of learning about and controlling this relationship. Every Japanese plane needs to be tuned for initial use by its new owner. This is not a defect in the plane, but an integral part of its character. To get the best results from your plane, the blade and chip breaker will need to be lapped, sharpened and seated in the body, and the sole of the plane may need to be tuned to deliver the desired results. This process is enjoyable, incremental, and a great way to foster or improve some foundational skills. Let's get going. Japanese plane blades are self-seating in the plane block and wedge-shaped down their length and across their width. The chip breaker has no effect on the seating of the blade, and all Japanese planes can be used without the chip breaker. In sharpening any Japanese plane blade, the two areas we need to concern ourselves with are the back and the bevel. The backs of Japanese plane blades feature a hollow ground, leaving only a small section around the perimeter that needs to be flat, named the ura. The state of the ura can vary greatly, between manufacturers, batches, and even individual planes. Generally, the higher quality a plane is, the better the state of its ura. It's important to get the ura flat for two reasons. The first is that it will be impossible to sharpen the bevel to its full potential if the back of the blade has any inconsistencies. The second is that it needs to provide a perfect surface for the chip breaker to mate to. Any gaps will result in a plane that clogs and requires regular disassembly to clear chips. If the blade is going to require a lot of material to be removed to bring the back into an acceptable level of flatness, it's best to tap out the ura. This process, called ura-dashi, is not as intimidating as it seems, but does require patience and a little bit of courage. By striking the soft steel or iron that supports the cutting edge, ura-dashi aims to mushroom out the hard steel beneath. As it pushes out, the steel soon sits proud of the rest of the ura and now can be easily flattened. When performing ura-dashi, it can be helpful to draw a pencil line 2/3 of the way up from the bevel as a target to aim at. I use an old steel lapping plate as an anvil and a 375 gram hammer. If you own a Japanese hammer with a pointed head, these are perfect. However, the bottom edge of the flat side of a regular geno is also effective, just slightly tougher to control. Only the material opposite the problematic area needs to be hit, and only light, repeated pressure is necessary. I like to hit the blade all along the bevel, check my progress on the lapping plate, and then return for more hits once I know what is going on at the cutting edge. Pay attention to what sections are tapping out and which ones aren't, and focus your attention on the areas that remain low. Once all areas are hitting the plate along the ura, it's time to lap in earnest. After the ura-dashi process, this shouldn't take too long. Whether or not your blade requires ura-dashi to be easily lapped, the critical elements when using a lapping plate are pressure and position. All the pressure should be applied above the bevel. Any lifting of the blade can be a real pain if a new facet is created on the back, so take your time and make sure that everything stays nice and flat. We recommend the use of a mild steel flattening plate to make sure that the back of the blade is flat. Waterstones are too soft for this job. White alundum powder is a good option for an abrasive here, as is scrubbing a medium grit waterstone across the plate to create a slurry. Here, I'm using white alundum as well as slurry from a 400 and 1000 grit Serac stone. Once I have the back flat, I can remove the slurry from the plate and work it dry. A bit of speed here on the final step can give a really nice finish, which is what we're looking for in the back. Sharpening Japanese plane blades is a joy. With big thick bevels and a shorter length than chisels or Western blades, they feel very comfortable in the hand and give you a great chance of keeping a flat, singular bevel when freehand sharpening. If you prefer to use a jig, you should just continue to use your process as normal. However, the unique wedge geometry of Japanese plane blades can make some Western jigs redundant. We stock a couple of specialist models of Japanese jigs that can be used with these plane blades, but I still prefer the experience of freehand sharpening. A few basic tips. Flat stones are a must. Our adhesive-backed sandpaper on glass works well for dry stones, but diamond plates are more versatile and can be used to flatten stones while wet. When sharpening, turning your blade so that the length of the bevel is parallel to the stroke is the easiest way to reduce rocking and gives you a great chance of keeping the bevel nice and flat. Having the width of the bevel parallel to the stroke is the most efficient way to remove material, but is very difficult to keep flat. Working with a blade at a 45-degree angle can give you the best of both worlds, but experiment with what works for you. On this blade I will go through 3 grits from 1000 to 3000 to 8000, flattening the stones as I go. If I'm sharpening after having performed ura-dashi, I begin on diamond plates. A convex profile can be added by applying pressure to the outside corners of the bevel rather than the centre while sharpening, in a similar fashion as is often done with Western plane blades. The blade needs to be positioned in such a way as to take fine shavings while retaining adjustability. The aim here is that 5 firm hammer taps will position it very close to its final working position, protruding a fraction of a millimetre from the mouth of the plane, while allowing the craftsperson to make adjustments by lightly tapping the blade or the body of the plane to tune the depth of cut. The basic tools we'll be working with are a small hammer or mallet for adjusting the blade. To prevent the crown of the blade from mushrooming, I've chosen to use a wooden mallet. A fine tool for paring the sides of the plane that may constrict the blade. A small 3mm chisel or needle file are ideal for this job. A lead pencil, and a way of paring away timber in small increments from below the back of the blade. Either a flat file or a sharp chisel anywhere between 12 and 21mm will all work well. The rear top edge of the plane block will see many impacts, as this is the striking point when removing the blade. To protect it, I like to pare this rear edge to adjust its angle and width. There's no hard and fast rule here. Keep the width between 5 and 10mm and bring the angle to as close to 90 degrees to the blade angle as you can. Once the rear edge is adjusted to your liking, pare some material off each corner to protect them from stray mallet taps or other misadventures. At this point, the new planes blade is reinserted with 5 firm taps to establish where it seats. This planes blade is about 3 mils short of protruding. We are aiming for the blade to protrude enough that it can just be felt with a careful thumb. It's worthwhile checking every plane individually. Tolerances can vary, but we've seen blades as far as 5mm from the mouth and some that arrive almost ready to work. As long as the blade is not already protruding from the mouth, all of these tolerances are remediable. The blade is then removed with mallet taps to the rear edge of the plane block. Use a pencil to cover the beveled side of the blade with graphite. Once it has a nice even coating, insert it firmly once more and then remove it again. The graphite applied to the blade has now transferred to the timber of the die. The graphite has rubbed on the high points where the blade and body are squeezing each other. These high points will need to be removed systematically to reduce the friction on the blade and move it towards the mouth. Pare away the topmost graphite-coloured material with a chisel or file. Work systematically, taking small slices at a time. Remove a small section, reseat the blade, check its projection, remove the blade again, and continue the paring process. The tuning can also be done with a flat file using the exact same principle. A possible issue at this stage is that the blade does not seat square to the mouth. This will prevent optimal performance and make it hard to seat nicely. It has 2 possible causes. One is that more material has been removed underneath one side of the blade and the other side of the blade is being detained. Add more pencil to the blade, reseat, and if the new marked areas are noticeably to one side or another, this may be the cause. Gently pare these back and check to see if the blade is now seating square. Alternatively, the sides of the blade may be fouling in the block, and this can be fixed. These outside edges can be carefully pared with either a 3mm chisel or a small file. Only a small amount of material needs to be removed, enough to ensure that the sides of the blade will not foul on the body when being seated. Once the blade is sharp and seating evenly, you're probably able to pull some nice shavings. To get full performance out of your plane, it's worth checking on the condition of the sole. The easiest way to check this is to stick some sandpaper to some flat glass and, with a blade and chip breaker if you're using it, inserted firmly but a safe distance from protruding, give the plane a few strokes over the abrasive. Most commercially sold Japanese plane blocks are set up to smooth. This means that the sole behind the blade should not touch the work surface at all. The very front edge of the plane and a strip of the sole 20mm in front of the mouth are all that need to contact the work. This plane block ticks all of these boxes. We can see that the only areas touching the sandpaper are the parts that we want. I'll refine this gently, though it probably isn't necessary. This can be a game of diminishing returns, as the more material you remove at this step, the larger the mouth size becomes. Keeping the mouth of the plane as small as possible greatly increases the performance of the plane. Once you've established that you have the contact patches where you want them, refine the surface with finer abrasives. The finer you can go, the smoother the plane will ride other timber. Then scrape the areas between the two contact patches to make the plane stroke as frictionless as possible. Traditionally, this is done with a specialised scraping plane. Here, I use a chisel held upright to scrape the sole. Stanley blades or even sandpaper can also be used for this job. And with that, it's time to see what the plane can do. Don't be afraid to resharpen, refine the blade profile, and experiment with different tapping patterns to seat the blade. We hope your Japanese plane gives you many years of satisfying shavings. Happy woodworking, and see you in the shop.